Every disaster in your life sent a warning, but you probably ignored it. Think about your past relationship that ended suddenly, or the job you lost out of nowhere, or the health crisis that blinded you. You likely saw it coming, but your mind just wouldn't let you look. Think about the last event in your life that really changed your life. Maybe a loved one passed away suddenly, or maybe you got fired from a job that you thought was secure. Heck, maybe you even walked in on your partner with someone else, like Grady in Eminem's song Guilty Conscience. Or maybe it was a good event, like meeting someone who changed your life at a random party, or stumbling into a business idea that made you rich. An opportunity that fell into your lap at exactly the right moment. Most people call these things black swans, unpredictable events that shatter everything. But that's a lie we tell ourselves to stay sane. Nassim Taleb wrote a book called The Black Swan about events so rare, so catastrophic, so unpredictable that they shape reality. So these aren't things that we can plan for or risks we can calculate, but they destroy our entire model of how the world works. Think about the 2008 financial crisis, 9/11, World War I. These weren't just bad outcomes, they shattered what the smartest people in the world thought was possible. The problem is that nowadays, anytime something major happens, they scream, Black Swan, the market tanks, Black Swan, political upset, Black Swan. Or they try to predict a future major event and say, is this the next Black Swan? Anytime something happens, Black Swan is trending on Twitter. What these people don't realize is that if you can predict it, then it's not a Black Swan. A true Black Swan is something you can't predict because it's outside your framework entirely. But as I hinted at in the opening of this video, the biggest Black Swans don't happen in markets or geopolitics. They happen in our individual minds. But here's the thing. Most of what you call Black Swans aren't actually Black Swans. See, every unpredictable disaster in your life, the ones you called random or bad luck, or the ones you said that you never saw coming, they sent you signal for weeks, maybe even months, heck, maybe even years. The problem is that you simply refused to see them. So they weren't really unpredictable, and they weren't really black swans. They just felt like it because your mind made them invisible until they exploded, of course, until they just couldn't be ignored any longer. But this is where things get a little spooky. What if you didn't just miss the signals, but what if your mind actively hid the signals from you? In other words, what if you're not the victim of black swans, but you're the one who's actually manufacturing them? Let's go back to the relationship example, because if you've lived long enough, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're with someone you love and you're planning your future together. You're talking about marriage, kids, where you want to live, everything. And you believe everything is totally fine. Of course, not perfect. I mean, you're not delusional, but things are good. Then one day, your significant other, they tell you to sit down, and you can tell from the look on their face that something is wrong. They tell you the words that everyone dreads hearing, right? We need to talk. Then they tell you, this isn't working anymore. I can't do this anymore. And boom, you're frozen. You don't even know how to respond. Wait a minute, what are you talking about? Where's this coming from? It makes zero sense. Their response is that they've been trying to tell you this for months, but they never knew how. What the? For months? And it hits you in that moment that there were signs. It's just that you chose to ignore them. They stopped asking you about your day. You would come home and they would barely look up from their phone. You just chalked it up as them being too tired from the long day at work. But now you realize it wasn't just one day, it was dang near every day. For weeks. The sex dropped off. When you first got together, y'all was humping like rabbits every single day. Then eventually, it went down to a few times a week, once a week. Now you can't even remember the last time y'all did it together. And when you bring it up, don't even try to bring it up. You're the problem. That's all you want. Then they apologize. They say sorry. They've just been stressed. Work has been crazy, but it's not you. And you believe them. That's because believing them is way easier than asking them that next question. And now that you think about it, they did start going out more without you. They said that they were just catching up with some friends. And you didn't push it because you didn't want to be that person, the controlling, insecure one. But now you're thinking back and realizing that they never invited you to go out anymore. Your friends noticed it too. They asked you a few times if you guys were doing okay, and you know what you said? You got defensive. You thought people were trying to break you guys up. Everyone is just hating on our relationship. Oh, how naive you were. But looking back now, every single signal was there. But in that very moment, you didn't just miss those signals. Your mind actively suppressed them. That's because your mind had built a story. We're solid, we're building a life together, we're good. And that story was so necessary, so foundational to your sense of stability, that reality couldn't compete with it. When they said that they were stressed, your mind said, they're just going through something, I need to be supportive. When they stopped asking you about your day, you said to yourself, we're comfortable now, we don't need to do that anymore. When your friends expressed concern, you said to yourself, they just don't see what we have. They don't understand us. Every single warning got filtered through the story, and the story won every single time. Your mind wasn't protecting you, it was protecting the story that you were telling yourself. And the story felt more real than reality itself. So when they break the news to you, it felt like a black swan. But was it really unpredictable? Or was it actually the most predictable outcome of a pattern that you have been refusing to see for months? The sad truth is that it wasn't a black swan at all. It just felt like one because your mind hid the pattern from you. And this isn't just about relationships either. I mean, when you get fired from a job, it's, oh, it came out of nowhere. But did it really? Or did your last 3 performance reviews mention areas for improvement that you never addressed? Did your manager try to have a check-in conversation with you, but you kept rescheduling, you kept ignoring them? The signals were there, but your mind filtered them out. Or what about if your business collapses? You may say the market just turned, but did it? Did AI really push you out? Or were your margins already shrinking for 6 months? Were customer complaints piling up? Was cash flow getting tighter while you told yourself, it's just a rough patch? The signals were there, but your mind chose the story over the data. So the pattern goes like this. Your mind, it builds a story about reality. That story becomes your reality. Any information that confirms the story, it gets highlighted, remembered, and treated as proof. And any information that threatens the story gets filtered out. It gets rationalized, and then it gets dismissed. The longer the story runs, the more permanent it feels. Then reality breaks through, and your mind labels it Black Swan, unpredictable, nothing I could have done about it. But that's the lie. Your mind doesn't protect you from black swans. It manufactures fake ones by refusing to see what's already visible, by building stories that feel more real than reality, and by filtering out every single signal that threatens your sense of stability. And the scariest part is that this is happening right now in some area of your life, and you don't even know it yet. There's a pattern forming, signals accumulating, and disaster building. And your mind is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, hiding it from you to keep you comfortable. So the question isn't, will a black swan hit me? The question is, which fake black swan am I creating right now? And that's the first realization, the first crack in the worldview. But here's where things get a little stranger, you could say, because we've been operating on an assumption this entire time. An assumption that seems so obvious, we never question it. Randomness exists. Think about it. The entire concept of black swans rests on this idea that the world is fundamentally unpredictable, that randomness is woven into the fabric of reality, that some things just happen with no pattern or no cause, just chaos. And if randomness is real, then black swans are, of course, inevitable. You can't predict the unpredictable. But what if that's wrong? What if black swans don't happen because reality is random, but because we can't see what's actually happening? Here's the paradox, all right? A black swan is only a black swan from your perspective, from where you are standing with your limited view. With your mind filtering reality through stories, it all looks random. But what if from a, say, higher vantage point, from outside your limited framework, it was perfectly ordered the entire time? What if The unpredictable is only unpredictable because you're looking at the wrong layer of reality. Let me explain. There's this thing in mathematics called a Fourier transform. And before you check out, stay with me because this is going to change how you see everything, all right? I'm going to keep it simple. Here's what the Fourier transform does. You take something that looks completely random, say like white noise or static or chaos, and you run it through this mathematical process. And what it reveals is that every piece of that random noise is actually made up of pure, clean, ordered waves. So it proves that chaos isn't real, it's just multiple frequencies stacked on top of each other that your senses can't separate. So imagine you're listening to a song, right? And the song has drums, piano, vocals, guitar, all at once, right? But when you hear the song, it sounds like one thing. But if you open that song in, say, an audio editor and you look at the frequency spectrum, you can see each instrument vibrating at different frequencies. The bass is low, the vocals are mid, the cymbals are high. They're all separate waves, but they blend together into what you perceive as one song. Now, if you wanted to, you could isolate just the vocals, or you could boost the bass, or remove the guitar entirely. To do that, you manipulate frequencies in the frequency domain. So you're manipulating the frequency domain, the hidden structure underneath. And that changes what you hear in reality. But the thing is, you can't see the frequency. You can only see its effects. Your mind works the same way. And this is what really confuses people. They hear hidden structure and perfect order, and they automatically think, wait, so we're just robots and we have no free will? Well, think about a video game like Grand Theft Auto. I think this is a good example that'll help you understand how all this works. Grand Theft Auto is an open world game where you can do anything you want. You can walk up to someone and you can punch them, you can ignore them, you can steal a car, you can do this mission or that mission, and it feels completely free. And from your perspective as the player, it is free. You're making real choices in real time. But every single action you can take, the code already exists for it. The game didn't invent punch random NPC the moment you decided to do it. The possibility was always there, written into the code, waiting for you to activate it. So is it random or is it predetermined? I guess it's kind of both and neither. The choice, your choice, it was real. You had agency. You could have literally done anything you wanted. Anything else, you could have done it. But the structure that made that choice possible was already there. Perfect, mathematical, ordered, free will existing within the code. And that's how reality works. That's how your mind works. The random emotions you feel, the unpredictable impulses, the thoughts that seem to come out of nowhere, they're not random. They're possibilities that already existed in the code of your psyche. And something like an event, a person, a trigger activated them. So you experience them as random because you couldn't see the code, but the pattern was always there. Carl Jung spent his career mapping this code. He called them archetypes, like the hero, the shadow, the anima. These aren't metaphors, they're structures. They are patterns embedded into the unconscious, vibrating at frequencies that you normally can't detect. So when something in your environment matches that frequency, boom, resonance, right? Suddenly you're feeling something intense, unpredictable. But guess what? It was always there in the code. You just couldn't see it until you activated it. Think about that moment where you experience an overwhelming attraction to someone. What do we call that? Chemistry, right? Love at first sight. Jung would likely say that that person simply activated your anima, the unconscious image of the ideal other person that's been encoded in your psyche your entire life. So a frequency that was always there, it was always in the code, waiting for the right trigger. It wasn't random, it was inevitable given the pattern. You just didn't know the pattern existed. You had the free will to walk away, of course, right? You could have ignored them. You could have chose somebody else, but the possibility of that attraction, the code for it, was already written. What you call a black swan, an unpredictable disruption, is actually just a hidden frequency in reality becoming visible to your limited perception. The relationship didn't suddenly end, the pattern was always there, vibrating below your awareness until it reached critical amplitude and broke through to the surface. The career didn't suddenly collapse, right? The instability was always in the code. You just weren't reading that layer of the signal. And let's say your emotional breakdown, it was also always in the code. The creative breakthrough, the crisis, the revelation, like all those things, they all follow patterns, frequencies, code. You just couldn't see them because you were looking at the space and time domain, the surface level of reality where everything looks chaotic and random. But if you could see the frequency domain, the hidden structure underneath, you'd see the perfect order. Scientists look at quantum mechanics and see randomness, right? The uncertainty principle, particles popping into existence for no reason, energy borrowed from the future. They call it uncertainty because they can't predict what's going to happen. But what if they're not seeing uncertainty at all? What if they're missing half the picture? Science only looks at one domain, space-time, the physical world, which you can measure with instruments, all right? But what if reality has two domains? The frequency domain outside time and space, and the space-time domain inside of space and time. Then, of course, it's going to look random when you're looking at only one half. It's like trying to understand a song by only looking at the speaker vibrating. You see the cone moving back and forth in what looks like chaos, unpredictable, random stuff, but it's not random. The speaker is just translating a frequency, a perfect ordered wave, into physical movement. The randomness only exists because you're refusing to look at the frequency. When you look at both domains, the mental frequency space and the physical space-time space, the uncertainty vanishes. Particles, they aren't behaving randomly, right? We're just watching the projection and ignoring the source. We're staring at shadows on a cave wall, calling them unpredictable, when the thing casting the shadows is following perfect mathematical law the entire time. So if that's how physics works, if even particles only look random because science is ignoring the frequency domain, then what about your mind? The patterns you've been ignoring aren't quantum particles, they're human choices. And if you're creating fake black swans in your own life by refusing to see the frequencies, by hiding patterns from yourself, then what happens when millions of people do the same thing at once? Because society is just millions of individual minds. So if individuals create personal black swans by ignoring patterns, then collective black swans that affect many people, must simply be millions of people ignoring the same pattern at once. For example, let's look at the 2008 financial crisis. The housing market collapsed, Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, gone, trillions of dollars evaporated from the system. And to most people, it felt like a black swan. No one saw it coming, except that's not true. Michael Burry saw it coming. Nassim Taleb saw it coming. A handful of people bet against the entire system and made fortunes because they read the pattern everyone else was ignoring. And then there were firms like Long-Term Capital Management. These guys had Nobel Prize-winning economists, sophisticated mathematical models. They thought that they had found a way to eliminate risk entirely. The probability of this failing is virtually zero, is what they said. And then they blew up catastrophically. They called it a black swan, an unpredictable event that their models couldn't account for. But other people saw it. So was it really unpredictable? Or was it only unpredictable from their perspective because their models, their framework, their belief system refused to see what was already there? Here's the thing, when 2008 happened, not everyone was affected equally. If you were a banker or a homeowner with subprime debt, catastrophic, right? But if you were a college kid not really paying attention, you might not even have noticed the crash. Or let's say you were graduating high school in 2008. You were probably too busy partying and you don't even remember the crash. So for you, it didn't even happen. So how does all this happen? Well, let's go back to Carl Jung. He also talked about the collective unconscious, which is basically a shared frequency space where individual minds exist and influence each other. Like, say, an individual radio stations broadcasting through the same electromagnetic spectrum, still separate but in a shared space. So your consciousness pulls from your subconscious. Your subconscious participates in the collective unconscious. everything you think, everything you feel, everything you do. They send a signal into that shared space, and it's a 24/7 feedback loop because your subconscious mind never sleeps and everybody's subconscious mind never sleeps. So it's just this constant loop that never stops. So when fear starts building, when enough individual minds vibrate at the frequency of panic, the pattern spreads. Then you have social media algorithms that amplify it, the media, they broadcast it, and social contagion spreads it. And suddenly, millions of individual minds are all tuned into the same signal. Each person still making their own choices, but all synchronized to the same pattern. That's when what looks like a collective black swan erupts, not because society got blindsided, but because millions of individual minds all happen to ignore the same pattern. So you have millions of individual black swans happening on the same frequency at the same time. But 2008, it wasn't random. Housing prices detached from reality, subprime loans packaged as safe, leverage at crazy, insane levels. The data was visible and the pattern was there. But guess what? Millions of individual minds were tuned to housing prices always going up. We've eliminated risk. Bankers, regulators, and investors believed that same story, not because they were controlled, but because they were all participating in the same frequency in the collective unconscious. And when reality broke through, millions of individual black swans occurred at once. To the outside observer, it looked like one big event, but it was millions of individual catastrophes synchronized. And here's the crazy thing, because now you are participating in something like this at this very moment. Every time you scroll and you feel outrage, you're tuning into a frequency in that shared space. Every time you adopt an opinion that you can't explain but you just know is right, you're synchronizing. You think you're an individual making your own choices. Well, you are, but you're also a participant in a shared frequency space. In other words, you're a character in the game and you're also a line of code. And the collective unconscious feeds signals to you. You're still choosing, but the signal you're tuning to, it's coming from the shared space. It's a feedback loop and it never stops. That's why things feel like they're always getting worse. And that's why there's more division and fear than ever. See, when enough minds tune to the frequencies of fear, anger, and hatred, it amplifies in the shared space. It then pulls more minds into resonance until eruption. Not one collective black swan, but millions of individual black swans synchronizing and detonating at the same time. So where does all this leave us? What if there was one final black swan that would truly shatter everything? I mean, think about electricity. For most of human history, lightning seemed random and chaotic. It appeared as if the gods were throwing bolts. People couldn't predict it, they couldn't understand it, so they just called it divine, they called it chaos. But then scientists discovered that lightning wasn't random at all. It followed laws, electromagnetic fields, perfect mathematical order. But where did these laws come from? Science doesn't have a clue. But the chaos, that was just our ignorance of the pattern. The randomness was code we hadn't learned to read. And once we understood the code, everything changed. We were able to harness it and build civilizations with it. What seemed like an act of the gods was just physics we couldn't see yet. And physics is nothing without mathematics. So you could really say electricity was just mathematics that we couldn't see yet. Now here's something to really think about. What if randomness itself is the same illusion? What if every black swan, every crash, every disaster, every twist of fate, what if everything that happens in the world isn't random at all? What if it's all just code, like patterns, frequencies, mathematics? We just can't see it yet because we're standing inside the system, inside the matrix, looking at the surface, seeing chaos, when from the outside, it's all signal. Now, that's not to say everything is predetermined in the way that science thinks about it. Remember the Grand Theft Auto example. You had real choices, real free will, but the code, the possibility space, was already there. Your choice to punch that NPC or walk away was totally yours. You were completely free. But the fact that punching and walking away were even possible, that structure was already written. So maybe that's how reality works. Your choices are real, your will is real, but the mathematical structure that makes those choices possible, the frequency domain, the code, that's eternal. That's already there. That's free will existing within perfect mathematical order. That sounds like something Plato talked about, doesn't it? Nassim Taleb called unpredictable events black swans because they shatter what we thought we knew. But what if the ultimate black swan, the one that would truly shatter everything, is this? There are no black swans. There never were. Randomness is just a pattern you haven't learned to read. And if that's true, if randomness is really just ignorance of pattern, then everything changes. The relationship that ended wasn't bad luck, it was a pattern you ignored. The career that collapsed wasn't a surprise, it was code you couldn't read. Or the perfect life, you accomplishing all your goals wasn't luck, but it was actually a pattern that you maybe figured out how to read and figured out how to manipulate. The black swan inside your head isn't just your blind spots, it's your potential to see the code, to learn to read the frequencies, and to stop being blindsided, and to become the person who sees the pattern before it detonates. But you can't see the code if you're drowning in noise. And that's why the elite are always trying to keep us blinded, always trying to keep us distracted. The signal is there. It's always there. It's always been there, and it always will be there. You're just surrounded by so much noise that the pattern stays invisible. So maybe the question isn't, will a black swan hit me? Maybe the question is, am I willing to see the pattern, even if it's uncomfortable? Am I willing to stop being a node in someone else's frequency and start tuning into my own frequency? Am I willing to accept that maybe nothing in my life has ever been random, and maybe, just maybe, I'm in control of my life? A lot of people are going to be afraid of that because they're going to be scared to take responsibility for their life. Those are the weak ones, but the strong ones, they're going to get excited by that idea. The fact that you are responsible for your life. You're responsible for every single thing that has happened and will happen, not only in this lifetime, but in all your past lifetimes and all your future lifetimes. So the disasters, they sent warnings. The frequencies, they were always there. You just weren't looking at the right layer of reality. The black swan inside your head isn't the disaster you didn't see coming. It's the realization that you could have. And once you see that, once you learn to read the code, everything changes. Because remember, not all black swans are negative. There's negative black swans and positive black swans. What if every single mind in humanity was doing their best to create positive black swans? What would life be like then for all of us? So again, once you learn to read the code, everything changes. Not because the world becomes predictable, but because you become awake to it. The patterns are always there, the frequencies are always broadcasting, and the code is always running. The only question is, are you listening?